We're delighted to have Patrick Bergquist with us. I am delighted to get to know him. He's a real people person. He's very approachable. So do know that you can shout out to him at any time. It's really terrific that he is now the Director of Programs for Episcopal Charities just since July, which is what, 10 months. So he's already got his feet on the ground everywhere. He oversees the grants process from helping parishes and programs apply all the way through the review process and onto awarding. Beyond the financial and administrative duties of ensuring a smooth grant process, which is huge, Patrick's most meaningful role is that of a support to the 94 programs that are currently funded. Most weeks he can be found visiting one or more of the programs, offering words of encouragement and working with them on any number of issues that they may be going through. This is what's so interesting though. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Patrick has worked with staff and board to create a COVID-19 emergency fund, creating resources for outreach programs and parishes and offering support, I would say, in many new ways. He comes with a varied background. He's worked in or served large cardinal parishes and in rural small parishes. Through his career, he's led youth and children's ministries, worked at a university in student affairs and in other nonprofits. Before coming to Episcopal Charities, he was on staff at St. Bart's in Manhattan, where he and his husband, whose name is also Patrick, were married. We're delighted that you're with us. I was present to your presentation on Friday and it's spectacular. So I'm delighted that you will be sharing it specifically with clergy because there are so many needs right now. Thank you, Patrick.
Excellent. Hey, thanks so much. And thanks to the clergy and for you all being here today. It's just a real joy to be here with you. We're going to have a conversation today. So a couple of things in the chat function, throw your name and parish if you have an outreach program, if you don't have an outreach program, if there's some way we can be of assistance to you, put it in the chat. You can have everyone share it, or you can send it just to me and we'll respond back and forth. And then even as we're going through the presentation, there's a bunch of slides that I'm going through just to kind of help visualize what's happening. But I'll have the chat function open in a window. So as we're going through, throw a question. I've told the leaders that they're welcome to, virtually throw something at me if we need to kind of go back and talk about something again or go in more depth if there's more questions. So yeah, Steve's already throwing things at me, so I feel good about that. So make sure you put it in the chat for me. And I'll be able to kind of monitor that along with Gina as well. I believe is going to be monitoring the chat. I'm going to share one of my screens here. All right. And can you all see the slides there? Awesome. Now let me pull up the chat so I can monitor that as well. Hi, everyone. Look, it works. All right, so kind of looking at what we're going to be talking about today, we have a couple of objectives. There we go. So a quick overview of our time together. The first thing is we want to do kind of a quick understanding of the trajectory of the pandemic and how that impacts some of the most vulnerable communities that we work with. So that kind of gives us the overall picture of kind of what we're seeing and how we're actually thinking about this laid out through the next 18 months or so. I want to give you kind of a brief understanding, kind of a briefing on the emergency food network and how to access it. When I was in parish work, both at large parishes and small parishes, I vaguely understood what a food bank and a food pantry was, but I didn't exactly know the difference. And so in this time of pandemic, understanding this emergency food network, I think is going to be really important for our congregations and for the parishes that we serve in. The third thing we want to talk about is some resources that you, members of your congregation, your community, can access So you get the resources to access the social safety network. Again, we're finding this increasing need in our communities, the need to access this network. And for many people, they've never accessed it before and are scared and intimidated by it. And so we as leaders in the church can help ease that fear and that tension. Then I want to have a quick conversation about how parishes can be involved in outreach, whether you have a program now, whether you're thinking about how to respond to the pandemic. And then I want to share a bunch of resources that we've created for you. We want to be in partnership with you. We want to be a support to you. That's in our charter, that's in our mission at Episcopal Charities. Oh, you're not seeing the slideshow, but my Zoom's been screwed today. Sorry, AJ. So let's look at this pandemic, how I'm looking at it. So we're looking at this pandemic in what we're calling 5 movements at Episcopal Charities. And we're calling it a movement because unlike so many other tragedies that we've experienced in New York, there's not a definitive start and a definitive end to this one, right? When we're looking at Superstorm Sandy or 9/11, they were created by events that happened at a certain time, and they stopped at a certain time, and then we began the recovery at a certain time, and that extended along. With this pandemic, we haven't really started at an exact time, and we don't know when it's going to end. But we do understand that there's going to be waves or movements as we're describing it. And so for kind of helping to be clear, what we've done is we've called it shock, that first initial shock that hits with the pandemic and our responses that way. Fight, how we're kind of fighting through and kind of soldiering through. Open is how we're beginning to kind of open the economy, open up social distancing, those kinds of things. A normalizing, we're going to enter into a new normal. And then a closing again, or another set of fear that's going to happen because we will likely go back into some kind of shelter in place. And that goes back to shock and fight and open. And so we're going to be going through this cycle a great deal, I think, over the next 18 months. So the first movement is shock. Everyone panicked. Everyone got scared. Things are closing down. One of the biggest things that just almost made me cry is when the school system started to shut down, because I know the impact that these schools have as safe places for kids. They're critical to the social safety network. And when they close down, that means we have hundreds of thousands of kids, millions of kids really across, who are now at home, often alone or in pretty unsafe conditions. But it's this quick shock, this reaction that happens right away. We're all shocked to see empty churches on Sunday mornings and how we had to kind of move into online worship experiences so quickly. We were shocked and got scared. And so you can see the bottom left here. We bought out everything we could. To clarify, those of us who had resources bought out everything we could. And the impact that this had, just the buying of bulk resources, has a massive rippling effect on the emergency food network, and has a massive impact on those in our society that are at the margins, who don't have the resources that many of us do have. I could go buy 8 giant cases of toilet paper if I had to, and wipe out all of those shelves. But the person who's living on a fixed income or is vastly underemployed with a family can buy 1 thing of toilet paper at a time, maybe. Well, if I've gone in and bought all the toilet paper, what are they going to get? If I've gone in and bought all the rice because I want to be stocked up for 6 months, what's happening to the person that's just trying to get through a week with a bag of rice? So we have these initial reactions coming out of fear and anxiety. We close everything down very quickly, and that's appropriate. We go out and buy everything we can, not so appropriate. But these are all natural response of that shock and that fear that happens. The second movement we've described is this fight. We use the language of flattening the curve, right? What we have to do, everything we're doing right now, flatten the curve, flatten the curve, flatten the curve, make sure that our healthcare system isn't overwhelmed, those kinds of things. And so we've done that. We've increased social distancing. We've begun to thank our heroes. But in this process, we've seen the need continue to surge from people. The picture on the bottom left is actually from St. Bart's on Easter Sunday morning. That's the breakfast line that literally wraps around a city block. I just read they were serving upwards of 3,000 meals in a week within the first few weeks of the pandemic. So there is a sense in all of this of like, okay, we have a purpose. We have to flatten this curve. We have to figure out how to do church. We have to figure out how to do our outreach programs. And there's this real sense of like, we're going to get it done. And that bit is exhausting. Like, that is just straight exhausting. And so that's the second movement of fight. The third movement we've identified is this idea of open. And we all know from the governor that the opening of New York State is going to take some significant time. It's not just an on and off switch. The graphic I have here before you is a listing of the 10 regions of New York State. And there's 7 metrics that every region has to meet before they're able to open up the first bit of commerce that are going to be opening. So the snapshot was taken on Thursday morning. And so Manhattan it has met 3 of the 7 as of Thursday. The Mid-Hudson has met 4 of the 7. Those are the 2 regions for the Diocese of New York. So it looks like the first region, I think, is going to start opening up this week in upstate New York. But even to get to this first step, it is going to take a lot of time even to get to this first one. And this is one of 4 sets of metrics that each region has to meet. So it's not as if, great, we've all been doing worship on Zoom and next month we'll all be together again. That's just not how this process is going to work. And it's not how it's going to work for our programs either. So there's these different phases of opening. And again, for each one of these phases, there's a set of criteria that has to be met. I want to point out phase 3. So we are weeks from this opening up. And those are restaurants and service industries mostly. That's where so many of our people who have been vastly underemployed are employed at. Those restaurants, most restaurants in New York, they need about a 90% occupancy to open, to kind of break even. And with social distancing, most restaurants are not going to be allowed to have more than 50% of their occupancy. So what that means is the bussers, the cooks, the line cooks, the bar backs that are all already underemployed. Many are paid kind of under the table, many are undocumented. Those kinds of people, they're not even going to be able to go back to work in this third phase when many others will. So there's a lot of industries that are kind of cushioned through this just because of the kinds of work I can sit at home and sit on a Zoom call and still work and still accomplish things I need to accomplish. But the bar back or the line cook is just completely out. So I bring these up because there are communities that are overly sampled in these particular industries that are not going to come back anytime soon, and are honestly going to be suffering. And suffering is the right word for it, I think. The fourth phase, there's a movement to normalizing. At the bottom we have, a picture of one of our parishes in the Bronx of doing worship on Zoom, and that's extremely exciting. We've kind of we're figuring this out. We can do morning prayer now. We can do different things. And so we're like, oh, this is our new normal. That's a good thing. At the top right, I have a picture of the food bank up at the Hudson Valley. Our food banks and our emergency food network experienced an expanse that was just incredible in need, that we can see from the jobless numbers and those kinds of things. So what's happened with our food network and our emergency kind of social safety network is they have been able to, they couldn't absorb that initial blow very well. And so they're reconfiguring. It's essentially they're creating another floor that they can begin to operate out of. So they're getting rid of some of their old stuff and bringing in new donations, government supplement, government grants, those kinds of things, and trying to figure out how to manage a new normal of a much, much higher rate of need. So I would call this kind of movement as we're trying to normalize. We know that most people in the United States cannot afford a $400 emergency expense just because people's savings are not there. This is more than a $400 emergency expense that our people are going through. So we have this normalizing that are happening. In this normalizing, we're also having a projection of more and more deaths. Our congregations, our programs are struggling to deal with death in a new way. I have kids in after-school programs who are losing their parents because of COVID-19 and are now living with other family members. How does a program director who can't reach out and hug this child or sit at a funeral and go through that important grieving process, how are they able to grieve through this? How are we able to talk about death? How are we able to talk about hunger with our kids? Because it's so out there already and they don't know how to handle it. And so we need to be proactive about, in this new normalization, helping those kids and those people who are struggling with it to be able to talk about it, to be able to give some context for it. So this normalization, it's not so much normalizing, okay, we're fine. It's normalizing to a whole new level of suffering in the context that we're in. The fifth movement I'm calling close. And this is really represented by fear. We know, if you look at the bottom right, a lot of epidemiologists, stuff like that, are comparing this to the Spanish flu. If you look at the initial peak at the bottom there, that's kind of equivalent to right now. The Spanish flu spiked up in its second wave. We're hoping that it doesn't spike up nearly that high in the second wave, but there will likely be a second wave in which we will be back in these places, back on Zoom all the time. And so how do we help our programs process what it's going to look like to open and then to close again? When we opened this last time, we were in this place of shock, right? Oh my gosh, we weren't able to plan for this. We couldn't think about that this would be our new normal right now. But if we right now understand that there is a strong possibility that we are going to go back into a closed state, into something that looks more like this than what it looked like 6 months ago, then we can begin to prepare for that. So our mind at Episcopal Charities, we think this process is at least 18 months. And the impact of need is really not going to decline during that 18 months. We're going to have moments of kind of increase, which we are still on a steady climb of increase. I'll show you numbers later on in the presentation. There'll be moments of plateau, but then it'll increase again. So we are not going to be going back to our levels of need. I don't think we're ever going to go back to it. After 2008, after the economic crisis, a new floor was created in the amount of need from what it was before. And with the pandemic, we have a new floor of need that's being created. When I talk about most often with program leaders and with our staff is that a pandemic is a magnifier. like it exposes and highlights things that are already in existence. So in a really positive way, a pandemic is magnifying the creativity, the sense of community that parishes and outreach programs have. Who would have thought that your parish could have shifted over to an online presence with morning prayers and Bible studies and worship in a matter of weeks? That is an incredible feat. I could not have imagined seeing what our programs are able to do in the midst of this. I couldn't have imagined the kind of incredible work they're doing. But again, the pandemic magnifies what's there. On a negative side, the pandemic magnifies those people who are already at the margins of our culture and our society. It magnifies their pain. It magnifies the way in which they are continuing to be pushed further and further aside, so that I could feel safer. Because again, I'm going to go get all the resources I can for me, and those other people, will just let them be over there. They'll manage somehow. Someone else will take care of them. So again, the pandemic has magnified the disparities in wealth and education, all of these things. It's been a magnifier. So this experience invites us to see and to change. It exposes the plight of so many who've been pushed to the margins. We're coming to grips with our own mortality in a new way. My dad got the disease, and like, to go for a walk after hearing that, and my dad was really sick for a while, and have to think about my dad not being there. I hadn't had to have that thought before. And so how to process that, thinking about our own mortality in different ways. It invites us to step outside of ourselves in a time of crisis. It allows us to channel our own anxiety to serve others, to be in and suffer with others. And one of the questions we have is, will our churches look the same after we are through this cycle? We have to be changed. Like, this thing changes us, in my mind. So I want to do just a quick tutorial on the Emergency Food Network, because this is what's being accessed in such critical ways right now. And it's helpful for us just to get kind of an understanding of it from a macro level, so that you can figure out how you can help the people in your congregation, your community, on a kind of a more intimate level. So a couple quick facts, and this was pre-pandemic. 20% of the kids in the diocese face food insecurity. That means they don't know where every meal is coming from each day. 743,000 people, about 13% of our population, struggle with food insecurity in the diocese. New Yorkers as a whole, over the whole state, it's about 241 million meals each year. So before the pandemic set in, hunger and food insecurity was already a huge issue. And again, as I said, the pandemic is a magnifier. So the food system is essentially just everything it takes to get food from the ground onto a plate. So it's a massive network. Universities are in it, markets are in it, government's a part of it, nonprofits. It's a really massive, labor unions, everything is going to be a part of that. So one of the reasons why we're having an impact on the food network, and one of the reasons we're talking about the food network, is because COVID-19 is impacting the way our food network is operating. This is from a CDC report that talked about food production, meat packing plants, those kinds of things. And because our network is so integrated with each other, when a food plant in Iowa or a chicken manufacturing, like a chicken processing plant in Arkansas, comes down with the pandemic and COVID-19 and they have to shut down, it has a massive rippling effect through the entire food system. Now, the priority in the food system is commerce. So the last place you will see that hit is at the grocery store. The first place to feel that hit is in our food banks and our feeding programs and our government programs. That's the first place they feel, because if there's a shortage, a company is going to make money by selling this stuff as opposed to giving it away or selling it at a cheaper price to the government, to a food bank. So that's why this understanding of the food network is so important to understanding the plight of people who are struggling with hunger and food insecurity today. This is just kind of a visual representation of what this all means. So if you look, there's the emergency food system is broken up into kind of essentially the private sector, which is the emergency food providers, and the federal nutrition programs, Farm Bill, SNAP, which is food stamps, all that kind of stuff. So those are kind of broken down into two levels. Looking at the first one, the emergency food system, Feeding America is one of the largest 501c3 networks in the country, and it's the network of food banks. So let me describe a quick thing, the difference between a food bank and a food pantry. A food bank is like a bank. It holds a massive amount of food for a particular region, okay? A food bank distributes food to food pantries, grocery programs, meal programs. So you can see that at the bottom, right? So like Meals on Wheels is a meal program because it's able to take money through grants and through buying from a food bank, prepare it, pack it, and get it into the homes of people who need it. A food pantry is able to go to a food bank in the region, purchase or get through grants large bulk items of food, bulks, and bring it into their food pantry to distribute. Does that make sense? Let me compare this to the federal approved food program, SNAP benefits, the National School Lunch Program, WIC, School Breakfast Program. Millions and millions of meals are replaced through the government program at a much, much higher rate than it is with the through the emergency food system, like the volunteer one. It's amazing that in these kind of nonprofits, these are like church food pantry, stuff like that, we've done over 4.3 billion meals. It's about 3 times that much in the government programs. So if the government stops doing these feeding programs, there's no way that the private sector can help fill that gap in such a quick way. So why it's important to know where your local food bank is, or your food pantry, and your local kind of feeding programs are. You start off by going to Feeding America. And if you notice on all of these slides, I'm putting web links on them so that you can just click right to it and you've got the resource. You can see where I'm pulling stuff from. Feeding America is really the big organization for all the food banks, and those are regionally. For the Diocese of New York, we have 3 regional food banks, the Mid-Hudson, Feeding Westchester, and the New York Food Bank in New York City. And if you see there's a thing that says find your local food bank, or food bank, find your local food bank. So if you click on it, you hit New York City, that's what you come up with, the Food Bank of New York City. Now, why this is really important is we are finding more and more people in our congregations who have never thought they would ever have to access the emergency food network, who are now calling priests and rectors and saying, I know we have a food pantry at church. How do I access that? Do I need to have a letter from you saying that I need this? Do I just stand in line with everyone? Do I need to bring an ID? Do I have to bring proof of how many people are in my family? Right? So these questions of people that have never had to access this are asking these questions now. So finding your regional food bank, because your food bank will have the links to all of the food pantries and feeding programs in your area. So this is what it looks like for the New York City. If you were to go to the Mid-Hudson and go to the Mid-Hudson Food Bank, one of the programs it would send you to for a food pantry is Fred's Pantry at St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Peekskill. I want to show this graph just to show you what their increase has been in the last, comparing the last 2 years of these particular weeks. They've had a jump of over 317%. A 317% jump in need. So we can see the first two bars in each one of these weeks at the bottom are from 2018 and 2019, and then the light blue one is the surge of 2020. And it's interesting, you can see by just looking at the numbers where that surge hit, where COVID-19 hit. If you notice, it says May week 1, and we have a drop. That's pretty typical for food pantries. Food pantries and feeding programs have the highest level of need at the end of the month. Because for many, they get their Social Security check at the beginning of the month. And so what we're seeing is that food banks and food pantries are really those places of kind of last resort for so many people. The check is run out about 2.5 weeks into the month usually. And that's when we see another spike in need. Okay. Our parishes are responding in incredible ways with food insecurity. Holyrood in Manhattan is actually delivering food to people who are scared to leave their apartments. They're often scared because of they're undocumented, they're elderly, they're scared of the pandemic, and so we're getting food to them. St. Margaret's Guild, they had to create a pop-up pantry because the other feeding programs in Orange County said we can't manage the demand. The demand is too high and our infrastructure isn't big enough. And so we need to open up another one. And so we're sponsoring a program at Grace. Food for Life at St. Thomas Amelia, one of my favorite programs. These people have nearly doubled the amount of fresh produce they're going to be able to give in their garden. They have massive lines forming in a drive-through pickup so they can pick up groceries in a safe way. The sense of dignity in life and joy that they have is really infectious. So let's do a couple of quick things about how to access benefits. Again, this is a new experience for so many people. I would offer to you some websites and information that should be on everyone's website as a way of acknowledging to your congregation, to your community, that we know something is happening. We know there's a pandemic happening. We see it, and we're going to try to respond. So I would have links to the nearest food banks, weekly, monthly food distribution schedule, location. All that can be found from your regional food banks. If you're in a school system that's providing food in the drop-in centers, have that information, put it right up on the front page of your website. It says people, we know it's tough. Here's how you can get help. I'm going to show you a link to the New York State benefits page. This is how to file for unemployment. Again, you have a lot of members of your congregation who have never even conceived of having to file for unemployment, and they just don't know how to. So I'd have a benefits page. I would have a page, the link for your city, town, or county Department of Health. The Department of Health, these more local departments of health, have some of the most accurate information as to what's happening with the virus in your community. And the more local we can get, the better. I'd also suggest having some immigration information, like immigration rights. What are the rights of people who are undocumented in this time? Because there is a tremendous amount of fear in that context. And then finally, I'm really suggesting making sure your congregation and everyone you know is filling out the census. What I am scared to death about is, because of the pandemic, the communities that are most vulnerable and most in need are not going to be counted, and so are not going to be resourced in the coming years. The census is 10 years. The numbers we get from this right now has an impact for 10 years. So with that, are there questions that I can answer right now for us? Are there, we can take a little pause here. I've been dumping so much information on you. So if there's questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to kind of take a little break here to see what we're thinking. I know Father Juan, who's doing a great work in Dover Plains about getting people counted. There's some clergy I know that have on their signatures a line that says, "Please be counted in the census," so that every email they send has a message about the census on it. That I think is really, really important. So let me continue on, and again, I'll keep trying to look up at the group conversation to stop with any questions that are popping up. Again, just virtually throw something at me, and we'll take a pause here. Okay. So when you're looking for how to find information from your food bank about kind of local areas, this slide just shows if you went to Feeding Westchester, which is the food bank for Westchester County. This picture is literally an embedded schedule of all of the mobile food pantry sites in a given month. So if you're in Westchester, you can embed this into your homepage or into your outreach page. Other food pantries have the same thing. Yeah, AJ posted up. Friday, you had a 140% increase. 2 weeks ago, you were only at 110% increase. So a 30% increase over the last 2 weeks is what this program has seen up in Armenia. That's unbelievable. Information on a help center. This is the New York State, but this is from the New York government. And this is where do you find COVID-19 resources, healthcare resources, unemployment assistance, all of those kinds of things. And again, it's right here on the website for you. This is from New York City. There's apps that they've begun to develop about how to access SNAP benefits and apply for SNAP benefits. SNAP benefits are like the food stamps. One of the things I will highlight, these are all web. These are all technology enabled because so many of these people have closed down for in-person interaction. So helping people who don't have Wi-Fi access, don't have computers, opening your church up for people and putting some laptops out so people can access their benefits is going to be really critical, I think. Local health department, I've got websites here that will take you, actually, you just type in your town or your zip code, and it'll take you right to your health department. Again, I think this is really accurate information so that you can be informed as to what's going on. I think it informs your preaching too, so you know exactly what's happening in your own community as you are trying to lead your congregations this way. Some immigration resources. The New York Immigration Coalition is a pretty strong organization. There's tons of others out there, but helping people understand their rights. We're seeing ICE raids have continued, not just in Staten Island, but all over the diocese. There is just terror in a lot of our communities, with undocumented. It's just terror. Here's some really interesting pieces on the interfaith census work. This is based in New York City, but they've got tons of information on it that can be used all over the place. Really good resources to kind of encourage parishes to get through the census. And then, of course, the Episcopal Asset Map. If you have a feeding program, if you have just even your church services, you can update all of that information. And so when people are searching for help in the area, your church can come up in this. So you can just dive right into the Episcopal Asset Map and update your information there. So I know my husband sits on a vestry. I work with parishes all over the place, and the financial crunch that we're going through right now, again, is incredibly magnified because of the pandemic. And so one of the first things that is often cut are outreach programs. One of the first things to go is we just can't afford that. And I totally hear that. One of the things I think everyone can do, even if there's not much money to go around with, is to educate your congregation on specific populations that are vulnerable in their area. In the preaching and the teaching is to help people understand and reach outside of themselves into their communities and what's happening. I think gathering those resources that we talked about earlier and putting those out there, because it's saying we know something bad is happening out there and we're responding to it. And so I think that's going to be really important. And again, it doesn't cost you anything, but it says we see this and here's how we can try to respond. I think you make it a priority in your leadership meetings to spend time talking about the community that is living just outside your doors. Like the parish model was meant to be like a community, a certain area in which you live, and to be incarnate into those places. And so to get to know your community. The other thing I would encourage you to do is either go out or jump on a Zoom call or a phone call or conference call with another parish, could be Episcopal, could not be, that's doing good work, and say, what are you doing? How can we help? We have people, we have a little bit of money, or we have a space. There's all kinds of different things you can do, but reach out and be in communication with people. And then you're always welcome. You'll have all my contact information. Shoot me an email. I'll talk to you. I meet with vestries. I meet with anybody. I meet with outreach committees. I meet with all kinds of people. Let's talk. Let's discern how we can live into this particular moment in a way that shows that we're here. So, who are your neighbors? What are they struggling with right now? Ask them. Talk to them. Go to local businesses, see what they're dealing with, talk to other churches. Whatever it is, be a part of your community, and then you can respond to that need that they're experiencing in a way that is connected to the actual need, as opposed to, oh, we think you all are hungry, and so we're going to do this, this, and this for you. Ask, are they hungry? Ask what kind of feeding program they need. Do they need a brown bag? Do they need a food pantry? Do they need a hot meal? Do they need a gift? What is it? Ask them, be in communication with them. I think we always look toward abundance and not to scarcity. You have assets. Your building is an asset, your grounds, but also the expertise of your parish, the unique giftings that they have. All of these things are assets that your parish uniquely has in this moment to meet the unique needs of your community and this moment in your community. Your parish doesn't just have isolated assets, they are also assets within the community. What they are in need of so often are these communities, like a network of churches that are in the same town, asking those questions as to what the needs are of this community and then responding that together, so that not one parish has all of the work and has to fund everything. It's about being together. So businesses, there's all kinds of assets that are out there, and there's great abundance. Let me share you some real practical, and again, I want to, not every church is going to have huge outreach programs, but I think every church should be reaching outside themselves the best that they can, however that looks for you. What I want to do is share some real practical applications, assets. We're going to try to be done in the next couple of minutes here so that we can do questions and answers for everybody. But let me share with you some of the things that we've created for you and for our programs that I think are really helpful. One, we've created resources. We've created kind of best practices. So emergency response best practices for tips for everyone, for feeding programs, for food pantries, how to do these things safely and effectively. Excuse me. We are going out, we are doing trainings with programs. We are collaborating with with our different program leaders to say, how do we do something well? The next one, we have a volunteer screening tool. We worked on this with Mount Sinai, so that every volunteer that volunteers in one of our programs is asked to go through this screening process every time they come in, and it's asking basic questions about, have you taken your temperature? Do you live with someone in the medical community that needs to be well? all of these things. And what we're doing is we're setting up systems. We're trying to set up systems so that we have small groups of volunteers that are working together all the time. So that we're not having one volunteer bounce between programs and potentially infecting. So we're trying to minimize those risks in a significant way. We've created some guidelines for our online programs that maybe youth programs need to be using as well. That's really following in line with safe church practices. So for our online programs, those are all there as well. We have volunteer opportunities, not just, or I'll get to volunteers in just a second, I guess. Connecting volunteers to programs. So this is me. I was just at St. James Fordham. St. James Fordham said that we want to have our food pantry open, but we don't have the volunteers because most of our volunteers are older. So School Charities was able to recruit, train, and outfit volunteers to come into that program and help run it each month during this time before they're ready to set up and kind of be on their own. We also have opportunities for people to volunteer all over the place, and they can do it virtually. We have online tutoring programs that are happening all over the diocese, and they need tutors who are literally going to sit on Zoom and help a kid with math. I hope that's not me because I'm not good at math. But what we're going to have is we're going to have opportunities for people to connect. We're trying to get people to volunteer in small groups. So for instance, this group of 4 people that were at St. James, most of those people came back the next month as well and were the same team that were operating that program. None of them had any connection to an Episcopal church. None of them had even heard of Episcopal Charities before they volunteered the first time. And because they felt safe and because they were trained, they were able to have, I think, a really solid experience there. We're connecting our leaders. I'm going up to programs all the time. We're on calls that are both like heart-wrenching because we're dealing with programs that are just hurting and struggling, and conversations that are the most enlightening gift that you can imagine of parishes and programs trying to figure out how to respond well in this time of crisis. It's been amazing. Connecting with our programs over on the left is one of our program leaders is connecting with their kids through Fortnite, which is a gaming system, to just try to find any way possible of connecting with their people. We're hosting weekly calls with our partners. So clergy are invited to that call. We're doing specific calls for feeding programs, specific calls for education, after school summer camp programs. And then every Wednesday, we're doing calls with kind of our broader donor base, giving a 15-minute update as to what we're doing with our programs. So the COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund, we've raised about $150,000, and we're in the process of raising several $100,000 more, is what we're shooting for. Because we're having needs of programs increasing of 300% need, those have real costs. And most of our programs can't go to the big foundations that are giving away hundreds of millions of dollars because they're not 501c3s, they're not big enough, they don't have a staff that can write these massive grant applications. So to date, we've given away $155,000 to programs within the Diocese of New York that are in direct response to the COVID-19 crisis. We're giving priority to our programs that we already have relationships with, but we're open to other programs within the diocese. Just be in contact with me and we'll work through what that looks like, what those details look like, and how you can apply for that. For this, because we know it's an emergency fund, the application, it doesn't take very long. Our regular grant application is a beast, which we have to trim down anyways, but our COVID-19 response, our emergency relief fund, is pretty simple to go through. We have a review committee that's meeting every week so that we can get money out into the programs. We've literally had programs who've written to us and said, our shelves are bare. We gave away every bit of food we had this last distribution. And so we do a wire transfer to make sure they can go buy more food to take care of the communities that they so love. So there's a couple different ways. Obviously, if you need funding, there's an application. This is all on our website. If you have some extra from a special gift or something like that, that you want to give to the COVID-19 Relief Fund or to Episcopal Charities, just so you know, every dollar that we receive through these, every donation we receive, every donation to the Relief Fund, 100% of it goes right back out into the programs. Our administrative costs are covered in other ways. So my salary is covered in a different way. So when you make a contribution to us through our website, if you give us $100, I'm putting $100 to work at a food pantry. $100 does 310 meals at a food pantry. $100. That's incredible. So 31 cents a meal at a food pantry is our average of what it costs per meal. At a feeding program, it's about $1.92. So if you calculate out, that's the number of meals in which you are helping to provide. 31 cents, $1.92. I think it's pretty amazing. Again, you can always reach out to us. This is our staff. We're a small crew, but we work pretty hard to get stuff done. So you can always, again, this is all on our website. You're welcome to reach out to any one of us. So I will stop sharing my screen and we'll enter into a conversation here. If there's questions or things that I can offer or ideas that you all have that you're doing right now, we'd love to hear any of those things. So it's great. It's fun to kind of be back on and see, like we've worked with Reverend AJ and Reverend Cooper and several of people here on this call. Oh, Vicki, I think
Yeah,
you're
I
on.
have to figure out how to unmute. Thank you. I have a question about thrift stores.
Yeah.
We've got lots of clothes. We also have elderly volunteers and are concerned about it, but we also know that the community in Getty Square is in need of clothing. Is there a way in which a thrift store can be reopened? Is that something you've dealt with yet?
So our suggestion right now has been no.
Yeah.
It is too hard. It's too hard to manage, like
Right.
all the cleanliness and the social distancing in those programs.
Yeah.
It's getting people in a building. So all of our feeding programs right now, they're all happening outside.
Yeah.
Because, it's fresh air. It's people aren't, touching surfaces as much, those kinds of things. So if there are people that specifically need things, if you were to have kind of a private consultation with them and someone could go and pull items that would then be given to them,
right,
that would be one way to do it. But bringing them in to go for a shopping experience in a thrift store is going to be really difficult right now until we get a better handle on what's happening. I also know there's a lot of parishes that utilize their thrift store as a significant income driver for parishes.
Yeah.
And so I know that they're suffering in a really significant way there too.
Right.
But just from a safety concern,
Right.
we're really hesitant to say, yeah, open those doors up, even though we know there's a need.
Yeah.
How to do it would be to kind of set up individual appointments and you bringing things out to them.
Right. Right. Okay.
And not going inside.
Okay. Thanks.
This is a reality that just by listening to you, Patrick, it sounds like really overwhelming to a moment, and then it kind of injects some anxiety in my system, like, oh my God, what can I do? So it's something that I'm finding the practical points of what you're putting there in the presentation so critical right now. Just putting something on my Facebook page, on my website, something where people can have access to some information right now. So what we are seeing on the field is a lot of people are coming back to their churches for resources. they're saying, you're a trusted institutions here in my town. What can I do? Where can I apply for benefits? Where can I find a food pantry? How do I go about the process? So having something outside there, just for the sake of information, you don't have to create a program. You don't have to do like the major thing, just put out the information so that people can have access to that information right now. So there is no parish right now that is not touched by this reality. Everyone across the diocese, 197 churches that we have, all of them in one way or the other have been touched by this reality. And we are going to see again that increase in the need and in the access as well, that people needing some resources and concrete ways to respond to them as well. So I really appreciate that those resources that you're putting out there, Patrick, because I think they are going to be practical way than just copying and pasting the link on my Facebook page, for example. Yes, that alone will help someone. Thank you, Patrick, for that.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll share that real quick. There you are. Sorry, my computer is being screwed. There it is. So again, these are just are pretty simple things to put up. Finding the link to your food distribution, link to the state New York benefits, city, town, county Department of Health, and really census data. I just think are really, really important. So putting these kinds of things up, and here's the other thing I would really suggest is in your area, there are Episcopal parishes that are doing exceptional work right now that would love to have your support to be talking about it. So if you know that, if you're up by Armenia, like no better place to go than to Food for Life. To have a space where you can receive donations for them in a safe way. I'm sure AJ would more than welcome additional help and resources and those kinds of things. So it's not that every parish has to recreate the wheel. In fact, that's not a good thing. In fact, we're very cautious about supporting new programs in this time because we don't want people to become dependent on them and they're not sustainable and they collapse, because then we're actually doing a harm to a community. So we're really focused on making sure that we're not going to do harm to communities through this, even out of our good intentions. Any other thoughts or questions that I can offer up for y'all?
Patrick, immediately to your right.
Yep.
A wonderful theme I'm hearing here is simply always to think in terms of partnership, both in terms of partnership of suffering and a partnership of health, that so many of us have been in the position of being able to help the people out there. And then suddenly the people in here need help, and you have one or two reactions. The big one is, I need it, I need it, I need it.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's something we can learn from the people we used to serve. And without serving ourselves, it's like, how do they get through that? I was very taken by the wisdom lesson at the very beginning, which is that wisdom has come to people who were slaves, that the people at the top obviously no longer have the franchise on wisdom. Wisdom has come to everybody.
Yeah.
So we learn from that. And then the other is that I take away from this is think of yourselves, we need to think of ourselves in partnership, both with the marvelous ways in which Episcopal Charities is stepping with all these ideas, but also the other congregations and people in our immediate area, which is, what do we have that the Jews don't have? What do they have that we need? What about the Presbyterians? And create this congregational safety net in our neighborhoods. So thank you for opening that up.
Yeah, Steve, I mean, you were spot on right. It's interesting, there's new research, it's a big research book called Forces for Good, which is talking about what nonprofits in the country are doing and kind of the trajectory of what's going to happen there. And they're saying there was a model, a very siloed model in nonprofits, and I would say in churches, that this nonprofit does this business does this church does this, and there's very little gap. There's very little connection between the two. And what we're finding is, in order to have real social impact, it's bridging all of those gaps between the nonprofit world, the religious world, the business world, the government world. And what happens is the forces, the investment that you put into that is magnified considerably by being in partnership. And the impact you're having is blown up considerably. So for instance, a program in the Bronx tweets out to a person running for Congress from their district. And the person had tweeted out, "What are you doing during COVID-19? This program said, "We are feeding hundreds of people a week in the midst of COVID-19 with their website." That person is running for Congress. They want to be seen as connecting with their people and doing good. So what do? They blast it out to their constituents, which means different people start giving to this feeding program, which means there's connections made to this program, which means their impact has now increased again, right? Because they chose not to just be, we are this feeding program, right? Because they expanded out and found the assets that other people have, they're able to do the ministry that they feel called to in a more significant and powerful way. So I think it's learning from the wisdom, just like you said, of our greater community, learning from the wisdom of all of our brothers and sisters, of how to suffer. Like, and again, my suffering is a very different suffering because I got plenty of food in the refrigerator. Literally, I'm having phone calls with program leaders who are hearing arguments going on in the background of a tutoring session because mom and dad don't have enough food to eat. And that was about 2 weeks into the pandemic. And I know those families. Again, we've often talked about, you know, how important it is to flatten that curve, right? And to go down. I think this is obvious, but just to make it very clear, the trend line for need is not following that curve whatsoever. It's only increasing. Again, AJ said that they're up 140% increase. I think it was up there 2 weeks ago, and they were at 110% increase. So another 30% increase over 2 weeks, and the line has been flattened up there, but not the need line. So I think that's just, I think it's really, really important for us to keep in mind. Any other thoughts or things like we can talk about here?
Hi, hi Patrick. Thank you for sharing what you've shared with us today. I'm curious. You know, we have our food pantry has, you know, a separate account and all that. And I'm at St. Stephen's in Pearl River.
Okay.
And so we're kind of on the edges of things as far as what the folks in the city are facing, but we have a lot of the financial need because our communities here in Rockland County, we have a lot of commuter families who, you know, many of them, if they weren't working from home already, have had layoffs and furloughs and stuff like that. But then we also have just a vast array of socioeconomic status around our county. And we've had to shift from, you know, in-person pantries to doing, you know, scheduling pickups. You know, people come in, they call the church and we schedule when they can pick up their food. And so we saw a dip, but we're starting to see, you know, because we became an emergency pantry in essence, we saw a dip at first. And now we're starting to see just a straight up line, basically an exponential increase, and have started doing deliveries. And with a group that's got that separate, you know, it kind of operates separately from what the church's main stuff is. but now I'm doing a lot more with it because I'm the one that's here because I live in the rectory. So it's me who sets out the food for people to pick up, and it's me who does the calls, and it's me who arranges the drivers and stuff. But for the, like you said, the one person put on Twitter for Blast to get new sources of things. Mike, what would you recommend to me for how to get my volunteers to be able to do some of this stuff so that it's not, because I'm perfectly capable of setting up another online giving platform for that account and for doing Twitter and stuff. I'm capable of doing that. But if I want to actually feel like I want to be a priest in another 3 months, I feel like I probably shouldn't do all of it by myself. So how would you recommend motivating somebody who's in their mid-60s who runs that program to at least either do it or find somebody to do it?
Yeah, well, a couple of things come to mind. The first thing that would come to mind is there is a community out there. Like, there is a community of people that want to help and be involved. Sometimes they just don't know. They don't feel empowered to do it. So we could also help you out with, we may be able to find someone in Rockland County that loves social media that would come on and help you do social media for this particular program. One of the things that we found with volunteers is the need to be pretty specific in what you're asking them to do and what the expectations are for what they're doing. We think this is going to take X hours a week. We don't want you to spend more than that. We think you're going to need to do A, B, and C in order to accomplish this goal. We're going to ask you to do this for 3 months to get us through this first bit of crisis. By putting those kind of stipulations around your volunteers, what it says is, like, because what happens in churches most of the time is you volunteer for one thing and then you're on the vestry 3 years later as a senior warden. Like, because like a church gets, like, they latch on, they're like, oh my gosh, great. So to be able to put on some kind of parameter to it, I think is going to be really, really helpful for you. And I'm happy to jump on a call with you or connect you with our communications team. If those things are helpful, just to be in conversation and kind of brainstorm some other ideas, or to have you connect with our volunteer coordinator.
Thank you, Patrick.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. Great. Any other things that would be helpful for us? I mean, I'd be certainly okay with ending a little early if that's all right with everyone. But
yes. So, and I think we are reaching that moment, and I think it's a moment to once again appreciate your wisdom and what Episcopal Charities are doing today. I think it's crucial, this work, and more than that, to know that we don't need to reinvent the wheel is so crucial at this moment. The resources that we have, the little, the much we have, we can be smart about them and invest them in a smart way. So we have an institution that is doing that work for us in so many ways, connecting us with resources, helping us to digest information that is out there, connecting us to local resources that are so crucial at this moment as well. And more than that, connecting us to other Episcopal churches. Who knew that we could connect with other churches? And at this time, we could do that so that we help each other in this network of services that we can be provided. So thank you, Patrick, and thank everyone for being here today. And I think one of the easiest steps that we can take out of this conversation is to put out something on your website in the church, or your personal Facebook page, or your church's Facebook page, something that can be of access, and believe it or not, it will be saving a life this time. It's something that's as simple as that. It's having people have some access to resources in a simple way. So thank you, everyone. And this recording is going to be online as well. So if you want to share this with your lay leadership, please do that as well, so that they have access to these resources. And more than that, they can spread the word and all that. So, and Gina, would you send us off with a prayer?
Sure. Before I do, shout out that thing again. We just really appreciate you guys coming. And thank you, Patrick, so much. I learned something every time, and I'm really inspired by this. And I will be preaching about it on Sunday. For those who I think hopefully every 197 churches in our diocese have some child of or teen of some age. Next week's focus is on children, youth, and family ministry in this time of COVID. Very specifically, in this time of COVID, we'll have 4 presenters that are offering a variety of just what's working for different places now. Please send your lay leaders, your Sunday school teachers, your anybody who is or might like to lean into that ministry, because we are needing to draw new people in who have that creativity. So that's the shout out for next week. And we have good things coming up. So yeah, Kyle.
Is that, so that's not just next Tuesday, is that also on the Friday one then?
Yeah,
Okay.
So it'll start on Friday for lay leaders, but y'all are welcome. And then the following Tuesday for clergy. And we're just going to dive into it. And there's some really, really great, very practical, easy to do things, especially for parishes who are a little stuck and need just like, give me something. So there you go. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Loving God, we look outside our windows today and we thank you for this new day. And we know that this is what we have today. Help us to be present. Help us to be deeply present to this day and the need that's in front of us, but still firing up our hearts for what we can do to love and serve you and those deeply in need tomorrow and the days ahead. Thank you for the wisdom that you bring to us and the community that you lead us together in and the support that you allow us to have for each other. Lead us all out into the world to love and serve you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.